All right, everyone, welcome to our usual session. We keep running these sessions that we've been ongoing for the past 5 or 6 months, and we're delighted to have two superstars of the corporate world with us today. We've got Miss Venita George with us and Miss Samantha Rowles. Thank you to both of you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Very
Thank you for
well.
having us, Omar.
Thank you, guys. We're on YouTube, and I must say that when your departments, your organization, when they reached out to us, they were so keen to promote this that we've got quite a few registrants, and I think they'll be joining us on YouTube as we get going here in a second. Once again, for those of you who are not aware, Vinita has been with L'Oreal Middle East and heads up the operations side, which is very important and interesting for us because some of the questions we want to ask is about business continuity and leadership in difficult times. And I know she's been a little bit busy the past few months. And then, of course, Sam, she heads up business development and business growth and enablement of business, which is also, an important topic. How do you keep continuing to grow business in these tough times? So, ladies, thank you again for joining us. Let me get straight into it. Let me start off with Sam, and then we'll kind of come around to Vinita as well. Let me ask you, Sam, March, our world turned upside down. Here we were thinking all our budgets were set, our expectations were set, things were looking pretty good. And then life took its toll. But I wanted to ask you, over the past 5 or 6 months, from a leadership perspective, I know you've been in the corporate world for many, many years. What have you learned? How did your leadership mindset approach change since this pandemic situation?
I think, there are two aspects of leadership that have really come to light over the last few months and with the situation that the way that it has been. And, one is looking at the lens through the people perspective and the other is looking from a business perspective. And for me, some of the key things that I think we've really had to focus on and push through on is resilience. I mean, demonstrating resilience and fostering resilience within our teams and our culture and our behaviours, and that ability to keep on pushing through and bouncing back has been really critical. And at the same time, having the empathy and the understanding of yours and your team's limits and that real kind of like in it together down in the trenches quite type mentality has been really key for us, because if anything, COVID-19 for us made us busier than we were before. We were all already very busy. So that people aspect has been key in terms of leadership. And then from the other side, from a business perspective, leadership to drive innovation and flexibility, and the proactiveness around how we've had to adapt our business model and our services and solutions during this time has really been key to kind of progress as an organisation and push through these difficult times.
Very good, Sam. So, of course, the people side I'm going to come back to, because I kind of know the kind of leader and person you are, and you've been kind of, making sure that, we kind of operate as a team through this pandemic, because you almost leave no one behind. So we will speak about that in a second. Vinita, I wanted to ask you from a supply chain operations perspective. I can only imagine the stress you've had to deal with, and I'm going to ask you guys about stress later. But I wanted to ask you, getting stuff around, trucks moving, shipments happening, what lessons did you learn in these past 4 or 5 months?
So first of all, when it comes to this whole situation, the first thing obviously that we needed to do was to stay calm, because the fight or flight, the chaos that can be created. So the first thing that we as leaders needed to do was to stay calm and to be able to make quick decisions. So when you talked about operations, you can imagine supply chain worldwide faced so much of bottlenecks, and as a team and as people on the ground, we had to activate quickly our business continuity plans, activate alternate routes when it came to shipment of our products. And all of this could be only possible if we were able to first communicate with our teams. Second, we were able to be sensitive, because the change, the pandemic, was something that nobody had seen before. And I think you must also recognize that here in the Middle East particularly, we have a very expat-driven society or, you know, our employees had people back home which they were concerned about. So here, as a leader, the first thing that we needed to address is the right communication to our teams to be able to provide them the alternative options, which includes a lot of the work from home capabilities, etc. And on the other hand, of course, protect the business and put in place these continuity plans.
Yeah, I love it, right? So you know, it's funny, 4 or 5 months ago, if you remember, right, all of us were getting these emails from like our banks and other people saying, "We're with you," right? We're all in this together. And no more emails now. Like they've left us out to dry. But I'm just curious to ask you guys because at the end of the day, you know, leadership is about helping people become the best version of themselves, right? Not us, not the best version of us, but the best version of themselves, given the talent and skill sets that we've had. I'm curious to ask both of you: did you find your teams and even yourself have that adaptability and agility? Was that something that you could tap into, pivot quickly, and kind of get used to what was happening? Or was there a moment where you thought, oh my goodness, this is the end of the world, things as we know it, you know, and did your team feel the same way? So adaptability and agility, you had it or you had to learn it? Samantha first.
I think actually when COVID first hit and we took it seriously and we went into lockdown, the adaptability and the agility and the motivation to for us as a frontline services public service company and to help in any way we could by putting together mobile testing solutions and all the rest of it to support people was absolutely there, and the motivation was there and the passion was there. And then I think we went through a really extended period of very long hours. Nobody had, weekends, late nights. We were reviewing things at 2 o'clock in the morning to try and, help our clients and stand things up. And actually, I think there came probably a time, maybe 2.5 months in, where then actually it kind of hit everybody that this wasn't a sprint anymore, this was a marathon. And actually, the level of energy dropped and the level of motivation dropped. And we had to find a way to kind of come together, make sure that everybody was able to take a mental break and a physical break to kind of get back into it. So I think it's been a really interesting few months and dynamic that we've gone through in terms of that, making sure that we adapted and we were agile, and then the toll that took on people as well eventually.
And that's what we're going to get to. And Vinita, I wanted to ask you actually, I know you had to work from home and your team had to work from home and you guys had to manage that kind of working from home dynamic. I don't know if L'Oreal, would you say you guys were already kind of trained or equipped to be able to do that? Or this managing from home bit you had to learn on the go? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, so first starting with the question that you had, that in L'Oreal, are we used to it? Yes, in L'Oreal, we are used to working from home. So flex work is not something that was introduced as a consequence of the COVID crisis. But of course, we tested it. We stress tested the work from home capacity and capabilities from this period. When it came to our teams, I think at the back of what Samantha said, it's very true. When the crisis started, we were actually not thinking it's a marathon. So the first reaction that we had is, how do we, I think it happened in March, and it was the first quarter. So obviously, as a business team, we needed to make good decision of the year to go for all coming through. We had to make good decisions when it came also to our teams, because we needed to support them. We needed to make sure that the health and safety of all our employees and the communication links between them is active, and that we continue to do this in a very organized way. And I must say that when it comes to support from human resources, IT, I think we all got together and actually adapted to this change pretty quickly and switched very, very quickly from the habits that we had, which is actually physical contact, meetings, and exchange, which is a part of our DNA. So this is a part of our DNA that we exchange, and we are a very, very, socially involved company. And having said that, particularly in operations, you can imagine that we are on the ground people, we have warehouses, we are generating orders, we are moving the products from A to B as well. So here, coordination, both from a system perspective and from an information flow perspective, and ensuring that on the ground, this is being executed was very key. And I think looking back, it's quite interesting how we actually adapted and were agile to deliver it.
You guys liking this or not liking this, kind of working from home dynamic? You can do meetings. I know, Sam, you traveled a lot back in the day. Not sure, Vinita, if you did a lot of traveling, but you guys liking this, or you just want this to go away now, kind of things to return back to the normal, or is this okay?
Who wants to go first?
Go for it.
Yeah. So when it comes to, am I liking it? The fact is, of course not. I love to be in connection with people. I love to travel. I love to actually, go into workshops with team. And I think this is natural for us, right? But is this the new normal? Is this not? I think we all have to be conscious of that, because we don't know what tomorrow brings. And this is the message that we are actually translating to our teams, that yes, this may be the new normal, but how can we make the best of it? So how can we animate more the virtual sessions? So this session with you as well is very interesting, because it's a way to motivate the rest of the people connected on how we can continue to fuel our, let's say, growth enablement drivers by this.
Sam?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a standing joke at Serco, actually, that I'm not a massive fan of this at all. And you can see, like, the first opportunity I was back in the office, but that's really a personal preference for me, because I've got very young children. I've got a 3 and a 5-year-old. And so I find trying to do my job at home with that, and the way that, during COVID, that parenting, teaching, working all kind of muddled together into one great big mess for me. I struggled with that quite a lot, actually. And so it's personal preference for me to, get back into the office and get back into the new normal. But what I do have is a huge appreciation of how we have and continue to make working from home work. And it has been a massive success for us, and we're even formalising it in a new Serco Flex policy. So from that perspective, I think, it has accelerated us into 2020 in terms of making sure that we provide lots of different options for how people work going forward.
So let me change gears and ask you something, right? So, I'm doing this women in leadership bit right now. Obviously, 5-6 months, we've done numerous topics, we've interviewed different people. And, I must say that I'm delighted to have you guys, because I know you're absolutely superstars in what you guys are doing, and your careers are thriving. I wanted to ask you a question. In your entire career, this is more from a kind of women in leadership perspective. I know the world that we operate in has changed, right? And it's continuing to change. There's a lot of awareness about kind of, gender bias that has existed definitely in the past. You only need to look at the Fortune 500 companies and to see how many women are in CEO leadership positions, and to get a sense of that's not really gone away yet. I'm just curious, in your careers, because I know you guys are trailblazers, and you must have, when people are moving so fast up the corporate ladder, usually you start hitting other people on the way. Did the gender bias, women in leadership, has that ever crossed your mind? Has that been an obstacle in your growth? You speak now or you hold your peace forever.
Absolutely, for me. It absolutely has, and throughout my career, I've been in, very male dominated kind of industries, whether it's construction or consultancy, even outsourcing. And, there have been times where I think I've stuttered in my career in terms of, and it's super subjective, I think, on who you report into and who you're surrounded by. And I did have an incident where I was continually fighting for a seat at the table because the role that I was doing was a leadership role. And the response to me was, it would upset too many people. And that's because there were no other women on the leadership team at that time. And so I would say, 100, and that's just one example that I have lots. And that's where kind of resilience and grit and pushing on and finding the people that believe in you kind of really comes to fruition, I think.
Very good. Vanita?
So on my side, of course, I'm the director of operations in Middle East. So you can imagine me going into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in a distribution center
Yeah.
where a female presence is absent. And on top of that, a female director of operations being introduced is even more absent. But however, I must tell you that for me, I've been with L'Oreal for 14 years. And going from my experience, I have never blocked myself. So that's the first thing I feel which is important, which means that I do not look at it from a gender perspective. So I always was in operations and I kept moving forward. And when it comes to L'Oreal, I kept getting the chances to go and push my boundaries. And this encouraged me. And this is why I am where I am today. And actually, I love the impact that it has as well. So, the moment when I was in, like the example that I gave you, when I was in Saudi and introduced as the director of operations for GCC, it was quite a shock, but it's something that actually brought a lot of added incentives when it came to collaboration, when it came to resilience, when it came to actually sitting across a table and presenting my point in a very, let's say, a gentle way, in a way. So this was very positive for me. So actually, I could use this to my advantage.
And so we've got quite a few people now on YouTube who are watching this. And look, if you are a young lady somewhere, and it's if you're thinking about is gender bias ever going to hold me back in my career, you've got some great role models and examples to follow in front of you. I also wanted to ask something around this idea of stress and stress management, because Sam, obviously one of the things that happened along with kind of managing remote teams and running business from remote in a remote environment was the this idea of managing family and managing kind of obviously for those of you for those people who are listening, we keep getting comments on how homeschooling and managing kids while managing a business, while managing other relationships, while staying positive yourself, right? I'm just curious, how did you guys continue not only to stay positive and optimistic yourself, but then how did you pass it on to others? Like, did you fake it till you made it, or did you actually believe there was light at the end of the tunnel, kind of thing? Sam, go first.
So firstly, I thought it was absolutely impossible, and I probably had 2 major meltdowns during the lockdown period.
Just 2? That's pretty good, man.
Two major ones. I had daily ones, but 2 major ones. But actually, from my perspective, I think it's important not to fake it until you make it, because we're already surrounded by social media and my life is perfect and all the rest of it. And the pressure that it exerts, especially on women in business, to be the perfect mom and teach your child and do a full-time job, I think is too much. And I think that all we perpetuate by trying to, project that as real life is not helping the other women who are coming behind us. So, of course, there was a responsibility on me to motivate the team and everything else. But also from a human perspective, it was important for them to see me when I was also vulnerable, and for me to say to them, it's also okay for you not to be feeling okay today, and perhaps not work today. Or we've got some amazing things at Serco, like the EAP Employee Assistance Programme, where we offer free counselling and all that kind of thing. And so we were very open and honest, and continually talking about that in our safety and value moments at the start of meetings. And so that was something that that I think mattered a lot to me in terms of honesty and authenticity.
Vanita, I'm just curious, did you have that kind of moment where you're like, oh, this is just too much, or was it your ability to kind of stay positive yourself, your own stress management? How did that work out for you, and how did you keep kind of inspiring and motivating the team?
Yeah, to be fully honest, it was very stressful. So of course, if we, going back to what Samantha said, fake it till you make it. It's nice to hear, but it's very difficult in a real, when you're faced with the reality of the situation, to handle it in a very what do you call it, fake way. So for me, I think fakeness was not something we adapted. I believe that the fact that we were very transparent, so me particularly, if I had fears, I did share it with my team. I was scared and I did share it with my team that I am scared of this situation too. And the fears are common. So, we were having a lot of communication streams between us. In fact, we had organized sessions with our HR teams as well as with the management team, where we were addressing the community with all the updates that we were getting from a corporate basis, and also within the teams itself. So if I talk about me and my team, I was on a daily connect with them. We were doing virtual coffees. Even if business as usual was going on, we were actually connecting just to say hello, how are you? And in some cases, even, at the beginning, Samantha said, we were connected till 2 p.m. because it's a call at the back of a call. You do not take breaks. And this was the beginning. So yes, it was very stressful. And it was something that we thought would be a sprint, which ended up to be a marathon. I don't think any of us believed that the lockdown would last. It's September. I can't believe that the year has crossed,
Yeah, I
So
imagine.
how do you handle the stress? It is by communication. It's by being sensitive that, yes, I may have a meltdown moment. Did I have a meltdown moment? Yes, I did, but nobody saw it because I
You
didn't share
gotta
it. My
close the door.
husband probably did, and my family probably did, but I didn't share it. And however, I think it's natural, we would all like to be superheroes,
Yeah, but it's very
but
interesting,
we are
right?
humans.
The word is kind of vulnerability, right? So about 6-7 years ago, the most watched video on YouTube before Gangnam Style, because that was very important. But before that was actually Obama delivering his 2013, I think, thank you speech to his staff, where he starts to cry, right? And so many people watched it, and so many people praised him. I just wondered whether this kind of the ability to show vulnerability as a leader, right? To be able to show that, well, I don't have all the answers, and I'm in this kind of situation myself for the first time. But we will have decisive decision making. We will have open and transparent communication. And love, Nita, how you keep referring to that. And that's a big takeaway for all of our viewers, quite a few now actually who are listening, to be able to remember that good communication, bad communication is better than no
No
communication.
communication.
Right. So that always that's a critical piece. I wanted to elevate our conversation a little bit and talk a little bit about strategy and business, business transformation. I'm just curious because this region, it's almost like cyclical, right? So we go through some ups and then we go through downs, and my goodness, these days the highs are high and the lows are low. But I'm just curious, in your opinion, do you think from a business transformation perspective, this was the cliff? This was that digital cliff that people used to speak about, that virtual cliff, virtual warfare, that eventually everything will go kind of virtual or digital. I'm just curious whether it's Circo, whether it's L'Oreal, do you guys see business transformation happening now, or is it just a bit of a blip and we're going to go back to the things the way they used to be? Sam first.
Certainly for us, Serco as a company, we're already on a transformation journey anyway, from moving away from being your typical kind of facilities management provider to up the value chain to managing people, data and assets with kind of a consultancy wraparound. So we were already on a transformational journey. I think what this has done for us has actually accelerated our 3 to 5 year plans anyway. You've heard the UAE government talking about consolidation, moving 50% of their service centres onto digital platforms, and they're looking to private companies to do that. So there, will be first generation outsourcing opportunities for us, which we were trying to proactively shape, which now, that is what the government is looking to do anyway. And so therefore, our strategy is to accelerate our government services side of the business with the ministries. So definitely for us, it has accelerated what we were already trying to achieve.
Anita?
Yeah. So when you talk about business transformation and the impact that obviously this period had, what we observed was very clear. We observed a shift first in our channels. So of course, we shifted a lot from the brick and mortar business to the online business. So this was a clear shift that we saw in terms of e-com acceleration. And today we jumped on that bus and we accelerated faster than we have in the past. And this is something that actually was underlined in this period. The second major shift that we observed was also in terms of our categories. So we do see certain shifts when it comes to the categories of coloration, makeup, skincare. We see a tendency where probably skincare is increasing because of the work from home and the increased, concerns that the consumers have when it comes to this particular area. So yes, in terms of a shift, we have observed a shift. Is it going to continue? It's something that we keep an eye on a continuous basis, and we try to be agile and to adapt to this change. So yes, definitely a shift has been observed.
Look, we've got quite a few questions, quite a few people watching. There's one gentleman made a comment. I'll just address it, talking about authenticity, talking about, when you communicate, communication needs to be empathetic, and everyone, understanding that everyone feels the same. I am going to come back to empathy, but I want to talk a little bit about the strategic side of the business that you're speaking about. Look, change management, right? This idea of change management. And again, anybody who has any questions, by the way, please feel free to ask on the YouTube page as well. We've got about 20 more minutes or so, and then we'll take any questions, and then we'll wrap up. There's 4 or 5 questions I want to get through right quick. I wanted to talk to you about change management. So of course, strategic thinking, people talk about that 8-step Cotter model is about establishing a sense of urgency and creating a, vision of what success will look like, and then, being able to go through those motions. Would you say that those models that we had, and you guys have learned, and you guys have taught others and practiced on strategic thinking and setting these 3 to 5 year kind of plans and setting KPIs around that, maybe am I being too cynical, or would you say this old school kind of KPI, objective oriented, target driven strategic plan for the year kind of stuff, we almost not get rid of it, but we need to be able to kind of revise it, because who knows what the next 6 months will look like? Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Cotter and sense of urgency. And I think if COVID did anything, it was give us an immediate sense of urgency, which was great. But, when you're talking about change management and managing change, none of that is relevant unless you address the human side of managing change and really taking people on the journey from the top all the way down the organisation. So, yes, there is still there's still a place for KPIs and plans and change management kind of frameworks. But if you don't address humanising the journey and taking people along with you, then it'll never be successful anyway.
Anita?
So when it comes to change and planning, you mentioned the word planning and the fact that you were being cynical. So for me, coming from operations, the lack of planning is not an option. So we definitely need to plan. But the way we look at planning should change with this context. Because as you said, 3-year plans, 1-year plans, 5-year plans. Yes, as an organization, we still need to build the basics on the backbone of that. However, what we learned from this crisis is also to be adaptable. So I keep repeating the word adapt because it's something that we really, really demonstrated. And I'm amazed by this demonstration from the team and from the group in general, because we looked at more short-term windows. We were not, there was a period where we were actually focusing on a 4-week or a 10-week basis, which is something that is not a practice. So it's not something that we always did. When you talk about FMCG companies like ours, where, from the fact of the consumer to the sourcing industry, there's a lot of value at stake. So here, obviously, planning is something that we continue to do. But what we shifted is actually doing a sense check of the frame or the period that we are considering in terms of action, and being more agile and less, let's say, focused in terms of the planned result, rather than, the effective result. Because at the
Yes.
end, we needed to deliver the business, and we needed to address that this is real. It has hit us. We didn't plan for it. Nobody planned for it. So let's go forward with it.
Just curious, because I know both of you, your teams, quite a large number of your teams are millennials, people born after 1980, like all of us on this call.
I am a millennial, Omar, just for the avoidance of doubt.
And I wouldn't like to declare what I am.
So look, so my question is, we generally see, and I'm hugely generalizing here, but with the millennials, attention spans are short. They need to kind of have instant gratification. Gallup did a survey where they tracked from 1982 for how long a middle manager held on to the same job in the same company. In 1982, the number used to be about 6 years. In 2018, it was 1.6 years. Right, so loyalty generally in every relationship, but especially at work, is low, right? And I guess also this idea of people engagement levels, right? So in the GCC, the Gulf countries numbers, 62%, right? Recent survey said that 25% of all people were at work looking for work. Right. So I guess I wanted to ask you, I know you guys manage a kind of a thriving business. So it's not, the buy cycles are not extremely long in your businesses, which means people need to stay sharp and stay focused on a day-to-day basis. I'm just curious, how did you manage? And beyond the pandemic, how do you, in the future, how are you guys going to continue to engage these millennials? By the end of this year, 75% of the Gulf Gulf workforce will be millennials. Just curious, what's the engagement plan, if any? It's a heavy question, isn't it? That's why you need a consultant to help you.
Amazing. Amazing.
Who wants to go first on this one? I don't mind if you want.
Go on then. Give me some time to think.
Go ahead, Vinita. I love it.
Okay. So here I think that when it comes to the millennials, when it comes to the, let's say the younger generation that, as you called it, without being biased, the attention span is low. Yes, it's a fact. So what do? We actually have adapted a lot of our, let's say, talent pool and a lot of our way of communication to this format as well, which is interesting to all communities, to all formats of ages. So this is something which is very important. And secondly, I think when it comes to keeping them engaged, what I believe compared to maybe when I was, back then,
when I was your age.
back then, when I was back then, when it is a sentence that I hate, but when I was back then, I think being ambitious, wanting to move fast is a positive trait. The thing that we need to do as managers is actually hone their experience and to actually ensure that they have a fulfilling journey, right? How do we do that? The world of today is full of projects, and we, in this situation where we need agility, disruptive ideas, wild ideas, ideas that were never thought of before, is something that we need to encourage. And this is something that that we continue to do. And I believe, at least if I speak from on behalf of my own experience, I have seen that this is the only way you keep the people engaged, because they do not want to be in the same shoes for a long time. They are looking for growth, be it on the format of a new experience, a new project, a new learning, that or just going against the waves sometimes, and being able to cross a mile.
Love it, Samantha.
Yeah, and I think the reason I was hesitant, I guess, is because we do lots of things. We just don't label it as specifically for millennials. But certainly everyone within my team is empowered to come up with their own bright ideas and to execute them. We don't say no to anything if it's a bright idea, if it's something that somebody comes up with and wants to have a go at. So that's kind of one thing that I guess that we're doing without realizing to keep them engaged. And another one is, obviously, innovation is one of our core values. And I don't think I've ever worked at a company that lives its values more than Serco does. I mean, we literally make decisions by discussing the values first, if it's if it's a difficult decision, and we really are a people first company. And one of those values is innovation. So again, they're empowered to come up with innovative ideas. And then the other thing that we're doing is looking at secondments. So especially for some of the people who have been in the business for a while, and we think they have much more potential. And that's something we're doing with the Women in Operations project that we have. So we're actively looking for people from the support centre for roles out on contracts that they can go out and do, to get some more experience, to then eventually come back or to go down a different career path to keep them within the company.
Yeah, fantastic, right? So it's almost like the audience is changing for us. I was doing this hiring into an assessment center the other day, and interviewing this kind of young, kind of Jordanian fella, late 30s, kind of head of sales position, and the CEO and I are doing the conversation. And we ask him in the end, do you have any questions for us? And he says, yeah, so I just wanted to ask you, what's my development package going to be? All right. And the CEO and I are looking at each other like, what's the development package? So like, so what are you going to do? Are you going to give me opportunities for cross placement? Am I going to get an opportunity to try and learn different things? Because, failure is a better teacher than success. And we're listening to this, and the CEO says, well, we have this kind of broken down leadership course from the 80s that we've got. That's about all, right? And after he left, we looked at each other and he said, that's the audience, right? That's what's changing, right? If the average kind of, if I use that word, employee now, recruit, they just don't want to come and work for those kind of targets and objectives, and they need something more. And those kind of just restricting them to KPIs and smart objectives and keeping their conversational transactional maybe not going to work, as opposed to elevating the conversations, making them key result areas oriented and more transformational in nature. I got a couple of questions, and we've got some questions lined up for you guys. Wow, the audience keeps going up. Must be you guys, not me. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you was coming back to a more personal perspective. Empathy, emotional intelligence, emotionally intelligent leadership. In the careers you had, and I know you've kind of traveled and been all over the world, this idea of asking your team, tell me, how do you feel about what you do? Like, do you think, in your opinion, that that's something that most managers, and I generalize here again, but most managers resist? So like the easier question to ask is, the project completed, the task done, deadline met. Is it a more difficult question, in your opinion, to ask people, tell me, how do you feel about what you're doing? And if it is a difficult question, why is it difficult for you? I'm just curious, are we living through an age now where it's becoming acceptable and maybe in some cases required for leaders and managers to ask people, how do you feel about what you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I think it's, it's really important. And the first part of the question is, why is it more difficult? I think it's because, historically, work, business, pleasure, two very separate things. The old 1960, I think that workplaces are still stuck in 1965 in the way that we operate, and actually COVID has helped us accelerate into 2020. But way back when the success criteria of what was established for what success looks like in a company, it's when women stayed at home and men went to work, and the value and the success was placed on how many hours you spent in the office. And I think that was like a very mechanical go to work, come home. There was no kind of, you wasn't bringing yourself to work. I think the lines are much more blurred now in terms of, authenticity and empathy, and people are bringing their whole self to work. So it's kind of a new question that you're having to ask as a leader around, how do you feel about things? And lots of people are uncomfortable with that because it's crossing the lines of kind of business and personal prying, I think. So it's a difficult one.
Vanita.
So when it comes to people, one of the sentiments is the statement, people developer, right? So how can you be a people developer if you don't have this empathy, if you don't have this emotional intelligence to actually understand what are the needs of the team that you have in front of you. So when you go to the question, how are you feeling? I think it's something that is very important, because this sensitivity is what helps us. You know, you started the meeting, I think, with this statement: how do you become the best version of yourself? To become the best version of yourself, you need to have a leader that shows you
Yeah, brilliant.
that you are capable of more. And this is something which you cannot, let's say, you cannot say it from leadership books. You have to say it because you feel it, because you recognize the strengths or weaknesses of that person, that you're able to develop that person by giving him or her sometimes feedback, which can be hurtful at that moment. But actually, if you look at it as a leader with sensitivity, then you're accelerating the growth of that
That's
person
it.
and you're developing that person. And this, for me personally, it's something that is very, very close to me. And it's something that I believe in very strongly, and I have practiced this. I know from the perspective that Samantha mentioned, that how do you limit that gray area of personal and professional. I think today the world is so open and connected that we can maintain this barrier while protecting this people development point, you know. So to be the leader
Very good.
that is sensitive and respectful, at the same time accelerating the growth of a person by looking at the good and developing the weaknesses
Yeah. So look, we've
or
we've
the
got
challenges.
we've got so many people, watching us, and I know quite a few people will have the opportunity to watch it later. And I just want to make a point that this idea of if you have a great manager, if you're a manager yourself, asking that question, am I going to be sitting? Is my employees going to be sitting somewhere and saying, I had a great manager once, they changed my life, right? Are you going to, hopefully for the positive, right? But are you going to had a great manager destroyed my life?
Destroyed.
No, right? So do you want to be that manager? And it's almost kind of that ambition, right? I always ask in my leadership classes, why did you become a manager? Why? It was just the next career progression growth, or were people development something important to you? IQ. We say IQ gets you hired, EQ gets you promoted. What you know got you the job. How you deal with who you know gets you promoted, right? That's a big element. I think I just wanted to add, from my side, I think one of the reasons why this conversation has become difficult, right? Asking people how we feel is because most of us, we typically are left brain kind of centric, right? So logical, factual, scientific, problem solving, decision making, kind of, that's the stronger part of our brain. And sometimes when we can't find problems, right, we create problems so we can fix them. And managers walk around trying to find people doing something wrong because they need to almost justify what they do, kind of bit, right? So I think that's that, looking at the gaps as opposed to what people are doing well. Final question from my side. If we were sitting in a year from now and we were having this conversation, as a leader, what are kind of 2 or 3 things that you would have liked to have accomplished, what you would have been proud of? So if you're kind of sitting and saying, Omar, if in a year from now, I would have loved to have developed this, I would have loved to develop this skill, a behavior, or an attitude, right? A skill, a behavior, or an attitude. Kind of a couple of things that come to the top of your head. What are some of the things that we're going to get through this, right? We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this on the other side. Well, what would you like to come out with on the other side? Who wants to go first?
I can take that. I'm not sure for me though it is a skill, behaviour, or an attitude. I think for me, if I was sat here in a year's time, I would want to see somebody else sitting in my chair and me doing something else. I'm a huge believer in developing the team to eventually keep moving up so that, I move out of the way and then they take that role. And so for me, it's all about developing the people. And, if I've developed our best people this time next year to be in more significant senior roles and prepping them for sitting on the executive committee and running the business, then I think that's kind of a job well done.
Vanita?
For me, I think the behavior or skill would be adaptability, agility, and the fluidity to communicate and take action. So I think 1 year from now, if I look back and I see that we've actually achieved this speed of agility, because for me, this is the yardstick of measurement that I feel is the real measure, because with the changing times, how quickly are we able to make the right decisions, how quickly are we able to mitigate the situation, is something which is very important from a business perspective. And as a leader, I think this is what I am encouraging as well in my teams.
Look, for me, it would be decisiveness, like the ability to make decisions and no paralysis from
Yes.
analysis, right? Kind of that bureaucratic kind of, sitting, making plans and then submitting them and then forever to get approved. If that's one thing that I think goes away in organizations, where people realize that sometimes organizations, like the Kodaks of the world, right? I just it's amazing, like to read some of the if you read the case studies of what happened at my Canadian friend BlackBerry, at RIM, and what happened with Nokia and Ericsson and Kodak, where it's not like they didn't know that they had to change, right? So their boardrooms were full of people in suits and ties and consultants walking around telling them, well, this is happening and so on. But it's like the technology for the digital camera was invented by an engineer at Kodak, right?
Yeah.
And he went to his boss and he said, look, I have this great idea. And they said, we make film. What's your KPIs? Go make film. What are you doing here? Right, kind of thing, right? So those mindsets need to shift to much more kind of dynamic, because I think the population is changing. We are the first generation in human history that is living with access to instant messaging, instant information, and we lived without it. So of course it's going to have an impact on us. It's going to have an impact on our relationships. I'll take one final question from from our YouTube followers, and then we'll wrap up our session. Abdullah Dean was asking, it says, Vinita, referring to the sense of urgency you spoke about, I guess Samantha also spoke about the Carter model. How would you tackle commitments that can't be optimally handled on a virtual basis? I guess let me frame that question in a bit to say, do you find that there are some things, and Vinita, I know you alluded to it, that you miss the human interactions and oxytocin, the hormone for happiness, one of the ways it gets released is when you shake hands, high five people, that kind of stuff, which again, don't do, please, if you're listening to this. My question is, do you think, are there elements of virtual managing remote, of working remotely, that have a shelf life to them, that there's some things you just cannot do? Or do you think, Omar, if we never had to go to the office again, we'd be set?
No, I think working remotely is not a permanent. And of course, we've gone back in a staggered way into the office environment. So this is something that is not guaranteed. You always work from home. But of course, the limit and the flexibility with which we've activated the work from home is something that was more visible during the lockdown, more visible during post COVID-19 and 19 crisis. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, very good, very good. Samantha, you go ahead, and then I'll just wrap up after. Go ahead.
I don't think that we have found anything that we can't do virtually, but there are some things that we do better together as a team, like workshopping and brainstorming and being able to scribble on the whiteboard, to kind of generate those ideas and those plans. That I think is definitely done better together in a room than virtually. But saying that, we have managed virtually as well.
Know about you guys, but I'm telling you, not traveling, not being on planes, and being able to do this from the studio we're set. I could do this for a while. Vanita George, Samantha Rouse, allow me to thank you so much for your openness and sharing with our audience, kind of this idea of leadership in challenging times, and you as trailblazers in your organizations, kind of your experiences, lessons. I loved how Vanita spoke about agility and adaptability and communication, and how that's so critical to move forward. I loved how Samantha spoke about creativity, innovation, and how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep up that level of enthusiasm and passion, and not to fake it till you make it, because sooner or later people find out anyway. I also like to hear, and really it was interesting to hear your perspective on the kind of business changes, business transformation that might be happening, and how those 3 to 5 year plans that you and your organizations had set actually have been accelerated and maybe revised as well. And finally, for me personally, because I do a lot of wellness stuff and we do a lot of kind of emotionally intelligent leadership conversations, love to hear your perspectives on empathy, your perspectives on asking people and not kind of worrying about the answers when you ask them, how do you feel about what you do, and not being afraid of the answer, right? And then being able to handle it with emotional maturity. Look, guys, your organizations are lucky to have you, and we've been lucky to have you on our call today. Just a big thank you to you to participate. I know you're slightly busy these days, so I really wanted to appreciate your time. For those of you who are listening, please do subscribe. Can you imagine this? 5-6 months ago, if I was going to have to say this, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Who would have thought? Who would have thought, right? But if you are listening, of course, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do these kind of conversations regularly, and always pleasure to listen and to learn, because talking is not teaching and listening is not learning. So if you've picked up something interesting, please make sure you action it. And hopefully we'll catch you on one of our calls in the future. Samantha Rouse, Renita George, thank you so much for hanging out. And we'll see you guys again soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Omar.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure. Bye-bye.
Guys.